When I was a little girl growing up in Washington, D.C., maybe 5 or 6 years old, my mother would take me to Woodward and Lothrop, Woody's we called it, a big, elegant department store in downtown D.C. We went there largely because on the fourth floor, they had a children's restaurant, little tables, little chairs, little tea sandwiches cut into quarters. It was a very special treat. But the thing I remember more than the restaurant was that every time we went there was a man sitting on the ground by the front door, his back resting against the wall. He gave a very disheveled kind of impression. He had a monkey on his shoulder and a tin cup in his hand filled with yellow pencils, which he was selling. I was totally intrigued by this man. Why is he here? Why is he selling pencils by the door? Why does he have a family? Does he have a home? I still remember him very well. Last week, when my granddaughter was removing the No War, No Nukes posters from my dining room table, she asked me, "Why do you do this? Why is it so important to you?" Well, I'm not really sure. And then I told her the story of the man who sold the pencils by the front door of Woody's when I was younger than she. And when I ask myself the same question that Gretchen has asked of me and Elizabeth, what makes you keep showing up? When I look back on that in some way, I think that that is the place where I began to sense that other people's suffering, other people's injustice touched me in some really important way. When I married and moved to Philadelphia, I got a job as a long term substitute at South Philadelphia High School, a biology teacher. I had no idea about teaching. I had never had a teaching course. Philly was a very tough school then. There were police in the school, there were gangs, there were no guns, but there were lots of knives. It had once been predominantly Italian, now it was a mix of everything. The advice I received from a number of the other more seasoned teachers was just do things to keep them busy. They don't really want to learn anything. And they were so wrong about that. I loved those kids and I worked my hardest to make them like biology. I created labs and organized field trips, neither of which the school had ever offered. And I felt deeply the lack of respect and the compromised opportunities afforded these kids. I was sorry for that and it made me angry. I learned a lot during those 4 years of teaching biology at South Philadelphia High School, and it planted the seed of determination to stand up for these kids and others like them, a commitment that never diminished. It was the 60s after all, and as the movements against the war in Vietnam, the women's movement, the Black Panthers grew, my own sense of peace and justice began to transform from caring to protest and to resistance. I was living in suburban Philadelphia at the time, and I was a young mom. I had joined a local group of Women Strike for Peace, and our first act was to bear witness against the Vietnam War at the very large and imposing Abington Presbyterian Church. We walked into the packed church 5 minutes after the service began. We stood in two lines on either side of the sanctuary, each with a candle lit in a glass container. We stood there in silence with our eyes down for the entire service, and we walked out 5 minutes before the end. No words, no posters, just silence. We did that every Sunday for months. We felt so daring, so determined, and so powerful. There are so many other stories that have shaped my life of activism in particular, like all the veterans that I joined along the way, my travels, my fortunate travels to places like Haiti and Tibet, Palestine, India, Guatemala, always coming home with this tinge of responsibility as a result of what I had experienced. I wish I had time to talk about the importance of being an elder and a grandmother in all of this important parts of my life that shaped me. I share these stories from my personal life as I try to answer the question, what makes you keep showing up? How do you respond to injustice? I never set out to be a peacemaker or an activist. I was pretty shy and self-conscious, but I had the instinct to follow my heart. And over the years, my compassion for others has become personal, and my anger at war and injustice has too often become a sense of outrage. I have no choice other than to stand and speak up. I'm not always right, but at least I can be a part of the conversation. Gretchen asked, what does it mean to commit to peace? For me, the question is, what does it mean to commit to being human? We hear often of the need to say no, to set boundaries for what's acceptable in our personal lives. I get that. I try, sort of. What I really think is that we need to stand together to say no, to create the boundaries for what is necessary to preserve our planet and life on it. I believe that our power is in our collective outrage. And I have a suggestion for Benjamin. It would be great if we had a drum corps here at Foothills as part of this wonderful growing music program. Because Dr. Martin Luther King said of himself 2 months before his assassination, when he was asked, what do you want us to say of you when you pass? And he said, say I was a drum major. I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for justice, and all of the other shallow things will not matter. Wouldn't it be great if Foothills had a drum corps, all filled with drum majors for peace and drum majors for justice? It's up to you, Benjamin.